Mr. Goodenagel,
Aye.
Mr. Abrams,
Aye.
Ms. McConney, Mr. Ishmael,
Aye.
Dr. Springer,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
Mr. Prescott, Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs.
Aye.
Mr. Speaker, online we have Mr. Sutherland, Mr. Sutherland, Your Honor, Mr. Rowe,
Aye.
Mr. Strong, Dr. Brown,
Aye.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland, Mr. Strong,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Speaker, 21 members voted in favor of the resolution, thereby satisfying the threshold of a majority of 60.
Resolution stands passed.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution that the establishment of the standing committees be referred to the Standing Orders Committee.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Standing Orders Committee have this matter referred to it for further consideration.
Question is that that the establishment be referred to the Standing Order Committee. All of our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 11:30 p.m. a.m. Sorry.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 11:30. All his honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 11:30. This sitting is resumed.
Government notices, sir.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Barbados Water Authority Amendment Bill 2022, the Caves Amendment Bill 2022, and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2022.
Properly.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Just to take a little while to take this up. And then do the explanation.
And then you use.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Amendment Bill 2022. We're withdrawing the bill at order number 3 on the order paper, which would have been read a first time on the 4th of February 2021, and replacing with the Barbados Water Authority Amendment Bill 2022, which is dated the 21st of February 2022.
First readings of bills.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Barbados Water Authority Amendment Bill 2022, the Caves Amendment Bill 2022, and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2022.
Questions that the aforementioned bills be read here first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, with that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until the 26th of April at 10 a.m.
Questions that this honorable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 26th day of April at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
We got to do it.
You're not quite finished yet.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are going to move that the House not be adjourned as yet. We're actually going to do the QEH Hospital Bill 2022 and then suspend.
This bill has been read the first time, Honorable Leader, Government Business. This bill has been read the first time.
Order number 3, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness, to move the second reading of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2022.
Honorable Member Sir Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill before the Honourable Chamber, as introduced, has to do with an amendment to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act Amendment 2022 sets out to really address the composition of the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in respect of the numbers. Mr. Speaker, the board, when the matter was discussed, recognized that we didn't have a voice, a singular voice for labor on the board. And the government felt it necessary that we should have on that board a representative from the labor movement. Mr. Speaker, if you go back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act, you will note that the composition would have been 13 members, and in addition to that, there were specific disciplines referenced in the Act when it was amended, not by this administration, Mr. Speaker, and I want to make that clear, but when it was amended by the former administration. And a glaring omission there had to do with the fact that even though it had a representative of human resources and industrial relations, it did not speak specifically to a labor representative. This bill now sets out to do so, Mr. Speaker, and in addition to that, giving labor a voice on the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I would want, in the interest of transparency, to say that there was a representative on the board but not in the name of a labor organization, like I said, a member as a HR and industrial relations person. And therefore, we are seeking to amend that in order to give the labor a voice at the board, on the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, has to do with the fact that the actions that were taken by a former board would, of course, be validated in law to ensure that there's no comeback to the government or to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as an entity, statutory entity. The other issue in this bill, and I'm sure that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, who was the Acting Attorney General last week, who would have made the amendments, will speak to, has to do with the fact that if other changes that are required, that we could do so. But of course, I'm not a lawyer, sir, like your Honourable self and the Member for Christchurch East, so I will leave that to the lawyers to address. But suffice to say that the bill will also validate the actions of the board taken of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But what it also signals, Mr. Speaker, is that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital board will have the requisite skills that are necessary to help us advance the cause of the board. I have gone on record thanking the former members of the board for their contribution, the immense contribution to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I've done that privately. I personally picked up the phone and called those who were not returning to the board and thanked them for their service. And obviously, that is a feature of this government in terms of how we deal and how we treat people. So, Mr. Speaker, it is, like I said, a very simple amendment which speaks to, one, the validation process and the composition of the board, where we're now taking the numbers on that board to 15 persons. And bring it to 15, a total of 15 persons on the board. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's any further detail. Just to update the country that both ministers in the ministry continue to deal with the matters before the Queen Elizabeth Hospital through the board. And obviously, in terms of corporate governance, that's the way it has to be done. We are looking at a number of initiatives. I would have spoken to some when I was in the well of Parliament during the estimates debate. For example, we are looking at a 5-year capital expenditure program for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We are seeking to improve the whole patient's experience at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. These things will take time. In the case of the capital expenditure program, that will be done on a yearly basis. And then in respect of the patient experience, that will continue to be a work in progress because it's not something that we can fix overnight. We are clearly also working with our health partners to ensure we get all the knowledge and the technical expertise required to help us in managing the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. That too continues to be a work in progress. But I believe that once we continue with our dialogue, meeting with our stakeholders, all other parties, that we will for sure see continued improvement of this Islands Loan Teaching Hospital, as it were. You know, as you're aware, the University of the West Indies do a lot of work there. It's a teaching hospital, and therefore we will have to continue with that focus and strengthen the relationship as well. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I ask, well, I'm not sure if any members want to speak.
Get the bill be read a
I,
second time.
and with those 2 words, I ask that the bill be read a second time.
The questions that the aforementioned bill. Go on. All member Christchurch East.
Just briefly, sir. I speak in support of the bill, sir. Sometimes people ask, why do we do the things that we do? When we do have a law review commission, sir, but when we come across anomalies or things that no longer make sense in particular circumstances, then it is our duty as parliamentarians and a parliament to make the process and procedure easier and more practical to effect changes that benefit people. Case in point, sir, in a number of acts of parliament, the appointment to boards of directors is subject to negative resolution and order by the minister. The minister would sign an order, it effectively becomes law unless somebody within a certain period of time, a parliamentarian within a certain period of time opposes it. So you say this is appropriate and you make the changes, usually to a schedule. In this case, there's the QEH Act. The schedule is what sets out the composition of the board. So at one time it was 13 members, we're now going to 15. Now, the fact that we had to come to Parliament to increase the number of the members of the board by 2 doesn't make sense. This is something that is relatively administrative. It is something that's not contentious. There's a good reason for doing it. We want to ensure, sir, if you look at the QEH Act, the schedule, it sets out what, I guess, professional representation they want reflected in the board. They want somebody with a business background, somebody with accounting background, somebody with legal background, something, because it makes sense. You compose the board to give the best possible advice for the direction of the QEH. And based on what we know obtains in the medical fraternity, sir, it is appropriate that although industrial relations is mentioned in the schedule at present, the fact is that this currently constituted board did not have an industrial relations specialist on it. The union wasn't represented. So this amendment now, sir, allows for somebody else to go on specifically to represent the union. But if for some reason, sir, the QH has a plethora of problems with engineering and failing equipment, and you want to specifically require somebody from an engineer to be on the board, then the minister can now make that change to the schedule and it become effective immediately he makes it, unless it is subsequently challenged within a certain period of time. I can't remember what the time is. I think it's 40 days, sir. But for administrative things like this, especially where in a lot of the other legislation, the composition of the board is left to order. We have the anomaly with the evolving legislation and the QEH legislation, which still requires us to come to Parliament. Had this been under some other piece of legislation, sir, this change would have been effected and smooth, seamlessly transitioned. But we had to come to Parliament to get the board increased to 15. So in addition to increasing it to 15, we've also, one of the amendments, sir, is that the minister may by order amend the schedules, right? And an order made under subsection 1 is subject to negative resolution. So going forward, sir, in relation to the schedules, which are not necessarily legally binding, but more administrative in effect, that allow you to put the structures in place that the law can be followed or that the organization can run, those administrative type things, sir, can now be done by order of the minister as opposed to coming to Parliament. So in case people are wondering why we're here to change, to up the number to 15, we're here because the law says that we have to be here to do it, but going forward, if you wish to drop it to 14, raise it to 16, require a specific skill set to sit on the board, that can now be done by the minister without having to come back to Parliament to do it. But Parliament still retains the oversight because it can be challenged within a certain time frame and be corrected if something is found to be wrong. So that is just, I believe, sir, that sometimes we just need to explain to people why it is we are doing certain things so they understand often why we come here and why certain actions are taken. So that is the reason why we're here today, to up the number to 15 and to give the minister the authority going forward to amend the schedules by order. And having said that, so I rose to support support the bill, sir, and I do so formally. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to everybody. I do support the amendments made to the bill. I want to, however, first and foremost, give due credit and thanks to the previous board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Being around the environs of the hospital, I have seen much of the work that the last board has done, and certainly I'm proud of it. To some extent, the patients and the staff are also benefiting from their efforts. I have no issues at all with the union member being there. There are several changes I assume will be coming on stream with respect to labor within the hospital. And the public is well aware, and the members of the parliament well aware of the issues that we were having of late with the hospital. When I say of late, within the last few years, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has come from basically the number one in the Eastern Caribbean to way below that. And it is my wish and that of the ministers to see it back to where it was and maybe beyond. We have several things that need to be addressed, to which the board will be accountable. Things like staffing levels, that is a serious issue within the hospital, nursing staff and other staff, but these are and medical staff as well. The delays, which are obvious to the members of the media and the public and the rest of Parliament, the delays within the A&E, the Accident and Emergency Department, within the outpatient clinics, these are things that need to be addressed and can be addressed from my estimation. We know that we are suffering. I heard the honorable member that just spoke mentioning somebody with an engineering background. I would appreciate that. But there's need, despite the engineering background, for new equipment. And this is where I put my little, what's the word? Oh, my little request out there that the members of the diaspora and the local community as well step up and play a part with respect to seeing that QEH gets back on board. The plant is an old plant. We all know that. And there are many ills within the hospital that need to be addressed so that it could run a little more efficiently. I heard what the last member said, but I want to state it here, as I did previously with respect to another board, that I will allow, and the minister, I'm sure, the board to do what boards do in terms of the running the institution. They will spearhead the efforts, of course, under our guidance. And we are normally the the minister anyway, that would take it to cabinet. So with that short intervention, I just want to say thank you to the previous board, and I look forward to welcoming the present board to see efforts being expedited to get QEH back to the institution we know and love. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would want to support the bill before us. Actually, my intervention comes at a time when I'm dealing with many of the issues, or a number of the issues, which tangentially the honorable member who spoke before me made reference to, where a number of issues have been addressed and have been addressed very competently by the previous board, which had a labor representative on it, though not one identified as one of the categories or disciplines specifically outlined to be part of the board. I am pleased now that we have made this adjustment, and I want to proffer too that there are other boards that may benefit from the kind of thinking that has gone into the amendment that is before us for the discipline of industrial relations to be included specifically at the board level. It does not mean that all industrial relations issues will be managed without there being cause for industrial action, for instance, or it does not mean that in every instance it will bring agreement. But what it allows for is for the specific advice and the specific experience to come into play to direct decisions of the board. We certainly welcomed it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when it was introduced at the Barbados Sporting. And we have seen how, in many respects, that addition to the board there has linked to a number of decisions being able to be implemented a lot more smoothly because of the benefit of the advice on the ground. This morning, just before making this intervention, there are a number of issues, IR issues, that have been brought to my attention wearing another hat. And I'm sure that if we have the active participation at the board level to address IR issues, things like health and safety issues that impact workers in a health facility can certainly be avoided. I think that the board representatives that have already been ratified will be treating to some of these issues a bit later on in the day, but I just wanted to make the intervention. I think it is timely that I have been addressing issues relating to the QEH this morning, and by way too, sir, of making the further appeal for other boards where there is not currently a labor's voice, that the board will have the benefit of to intervene and to offer guidance on a number of issues, that it be considered as something to be remedied as a matter of course sooner rather than later. And with these few words, I support the amendments before us presented in the bill.
Honourable Representative Michael Self.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't going to speak on this, but the honourable person before me made reference to the amendment that we made at the Bridgetown Port to do something very similar. And I just felt it necessary for me to communicate why that was done and to locate it within the same parameters and context as the honourable member who's championing this particular amendment. Sir, when we took over the port, you would appreciate that the port is a very highly unionized environment. And there was no specific person on the port to represent Labour. I recall, sir, the conversation I had with the Prime Minister when I asked her if I were able to do so, and her response was, "What do you think, Minister?" And I said, yes, and she said, well, it is best because by having a representative of Labour on these committees and boards, that we get to circumvent a lot of these challenges that may arise. And I would like to say to the public, sir, that having placed a representative of the Labour movement on the Bridgetown Ports board, it has actually turned out to be one of the better moves that I think we made. Because not only did we find ourselves in a position where we could resolve a lot of challenges before they became real problems, but we had the input, the insight, and the experience and the wisdom, really, and guidance of the persons in the industry to be able to help us as we manage the port. And over the last few years, a number of issues that probably could have become bigger issues were able to be resolved at the level of the port. The other point, sir, that I think is very important is that in being placed on these boards, it was not an effort to compromise the integrity of the unions. And in fact, the person who sits on the ports, board, if I may call, sir, is a person known to the union movement, sir, the excellent Sir Roy Trotman, no one that anybody could compromise anyhow. And that in every conversation, sir, it was wisdom and guidance and so on. And so by bringing representatives of Labour to these boards, sir, we do what is in the interest of the public. And every representative of Labour is told, when you come, you represent your people. Those are your constituency, those are your constituents, you represent your people. Because there was also some talk in the initial stages of our changing to include the port, the union, that, you know, you're trying to compromise and so on. So we made it very clear, you are here in your capacity as union.
And I think, sir, in having a person on the board of the QEH who represents labor would do for the QEH and for the Ministry of Health what it did for the port and for the then Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy. So I just wanted to say, sir, that I think it is a wise move. It is a good move. It is a move that, sir, will bring resolution to a number of concerns. And of course, I also wish to, based on my own personal experience as minister, having done something very similar, I wish also to lend my support to the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Honourable Member Mr. Michael East.
Just seeking clarity. I'm hearing about representing labor on boards, but I want to know if the person represents a specific union or just an individual that goes on to the board that represents labor. I think that is very important for members of the public to know, and the trade union movement as well. And I would like to know how that selection is being made in the circumstances, both, but mainly at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Honourable Mr. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me thank all honourable members for their contribution. In respect of the last question, raised by the honourable member for St. Michael East, in this case, it has to do with a representative of C2SAP that we have reached out to C2SAP in respect of that nominee. So just to answer your concern. I do agree with the comments made by the Minister of State, the Honourable Representative for St. Philip North, in respect of philanthropy and obviously reaching out to Barbados and those within the diaspora and those not in the within the diaspora, but those abroad who we could benefit substantially from in terms of donations and other critical equipment and supplies needed at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And that will become, obviously, a role that they will continue to excel in. I know that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, they've done a lot of work in this respect, and therefore, I think as we fine-tune our philanthropy arrangements, thereby giving us an opportunity to build out additional capacity at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There is certainly a lot of work to do at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The Honourable Member for St. Philip North highlighted some of the areas, and I do support her in her quest in respect of those areas that she would have highlighted. The board, I will say, will operate within the context of good governance. That is something that's always good and is a good practice. And from where I come from, Mr. Speaker, having the benefit of working for two public companies, I think it's absolutely necessary that people understand that a board's role is there for policy position. You hold management accountable for the policy objectives, and you get on with the business rather than obviously interfering in the direct operations of an entity, and that's the way I believe it should be done. I also want to say to the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, the Honourable Member for St. George North, that we will continue, and as it relates to matters of industrial relations in terms of the hospital managing those, that is a function that is reserved for the management. And I think that, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South alluded to what he did at the Bridgetown Port and the improved relationship it brought about, we are hopeful, very hopeful, that the same will obtain at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as we continue to improve the operation. And so on, Mr. Speaker, on those few comments, I would like once again to thank all honourable members for their contributions, and I would ask, Mr. Speaker, that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do not leave the chair and the House resolves itself into committee for the further consideration of this bill.
By the second, sir.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Act 2022.
The question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. I wish to alert the members of the Standing Order Committee that the Standing Orders Committee shall meet on Friday at 10 a.m. So I just want to put all members of the Standing Orders Committee to be on alert that there shall be a meeting this Friday. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, now we have finally come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move that the House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 26th of April at 10 a.m.
The question is that this Honorable Chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 26th day of April at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honorable Chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 26th day of April at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.